Hello everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations, and you're with Simon today. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Saturn retrograde, and I talked a little bit about this in the most recent video with the transits, but I thought that would be a good idea to just kind of spend a little bit more time looking at the dynamics of Saturn retrograde, looking at the dates, of course, and probably just giving a little bit of thought into how to best navigate this Saturn retrograde, and maybe even kind of addressing the nature of what the Saturn retrograde means for us in terms of our individual and collective storyline. So that's what I want to kind of address today, and hopefully this will be something that will be valuable to you. As always, this is a place that is deeply rooted in trying to help us navigate this current change that we're going through, this big global shift, and to be able to see the evolutionary potential that is essentially available to us when we map the stars in the skies. So, okay. Is there anything that I wanted to address? Nope, that's it. So let's just jump straight in. Let's take a look firstly at the Saturn retrograde details, and we can do that now. All right, so on the screen we've got Saturn on the 1st of January went direct, of course, and now it is turning retrograde, or has turned retrograde, sorry, at 25 degrees of Aquarius. This was on the 4th of June, okay? And then on the 23rd of October this year, Saturn will then move direct, and that is at 18 degrees. So for any person that has got your sun sign between 25 and 18 degrees, of course, you're going to be feeling the Saturn transit. If you have a sun in Leo, if your sun sign's in Taurus, if your sun sign's in Scorpio, and it is within those degrees, this Saturn retrograde, of course, is going to impact you. So if it's an opposition, there's an opportunity to really integrate the Leo qualities into your life. You'll see the need for showing up and being more creative, more alive with your life. If you've got, say, the sun in Scorpio, for instance, whatever it is that needs to be transformed in your life, where you notice yourself like really getting deeply psychological about what needs to change, looking at your limitations and your fears, of course, this transit's going to support that. And if your sun sign's in Taurus, of course, you're going to be looking at how you are cultivating and learning about self-sufficiency, self-reliance. You're learning how to really become comfortable in your body, learning how to live where you know your resources, you know how to share your resources as well. And then finally, looking at, say, Sun in Aquarius, where this transit's taking place, this can mean many things for many different people. There's no one size fits all, but ultimately you're probably working a lot on integrating how your sense of identity has something unique to offer the world, but it also speaks to your capacity to begin healing the individuated energy that you bring to the world. In other words, a large part of your life is learning how to be unique. Like, what does it mean for freedom for you, right? How do you be able to break out of certain patterns of conditioning that you deeply disagree with, as an example? How do you give yourself that space and that freedom? So this Saturn on top of your sun sign is probably going to be very much helping you focus on accomplishing that goal. Okay, so things to note. Of course, Saturn is an archetype that has a lot to do with the way that we establish structure in our lives, okay? And the way that Saturn operates is that it says, here's a boundary that you feel comfortable with, and then that provides you with a sense of safety and security. And you, through your daily actions, make choices based on, where the boundary is in your emotional landscape. So if you feel safe in certain areas, you may travel a little bit further into unknown spaces. If you don't feel safe in certain spaces, you'll put up certain protection, you'll say no to certain things, and you won't explore beyond those boundaries. And in a sense, Saturn is really the phenomena of how we negotiate what we are comfortable with and what we're not in our lives. And a lot of it has to do with our capacity for feeling competent, for feeling that we have resources in us, that we are courageous enough to break through certain thresholds in our lives so that we can explore unknown territory and grow. This is kind of what Saturn does for us emotionally and psychologically. So when Saturn actually goes retrograde, what happens is, especially from the perspective of VA, which to me I find deeply valuable in the understanding of this mechanism I'm about to describe to you, and that is that when Saturn goes retrograde, the Uranus quality, or the planet Uranus, takes on a more impactful role. Okay, so Saturn goes on holiday and Uranus comes along and says, okay, well, you know, here I am. And what essentially takes place is that there is a conversation between Saturn and Uranus. Okay, Saturn says, let's reinforce this. Let's keep consistency here. Let's establish a sense of forward movement and a boundary, and we'll say this is what we can come to for safety all the time. Okay. When Uranus comes to the conversation, it says, you know what, I really think that a lot of these boundaries are actually not working for you, right? They've become a little bit outdated. That was established a long time ago. You know, we're living in different times, and I think that we need to transform things. And so this beautiful dynamic between these two planets constantly have conversations where we're encouraged to grow beyond our limitations, but we're also encouraged to recognize what we're capable of actually holding on to. And so these two planets consistently allow for us to grow. Uranus and then Saturn establish and integrate. Uranus grow, Saturn establish and integrate. Okay, that's the cool side of these dynamics. What these two planets also teach us and show us is that when something has become outdated, right, senescent, when say a law or a boundary or a structure has run its course, its timeline, right, the spirit has left it, and it becomes restrictive or oppressive, or it is the restriction or the boundary is not creating any form of growth, it now is strangling it. Uranus comes along and says that needs to be deconditioned, right? We need to free ourselves from that. And held within that context is a fear of letting go. Okay, so when Saturn goes retrograde, for the period of time that it's retrograde, what we will notice particularly, and I'm sure many of you roughly over the last few days have noticed this deep impulse to want to throw things off, right? And say, no, you know what, this was working for me, but now it's not anymore. So right now, when Saturn goes retrograde, Uranus comes on and then points to parts of your life that says, how is this restrictive? Okay, or is it restrictive to you? Do you feel that restriction? And then the question then comes, is this benefiting you? Are you holding on to something that no longer works for you? Right? So there's a throwing off element that takes place. So when we begin to look at the chart, which you'll see on the screen right now, of when Saturn went retrograde, you can see that the context of the Saturn retrograde is very much about looking at this Scorpio-Taurus axis, okay? And you know that we've just recently had these eclipses, solar eclipse in Taurus, lunar eclipse in Scorpio, and we also have Saturn in Aquarius, okay? Now that is retrograde. So what it's saying here is that the energetic pattern is moving through a cycle where for the next few months, we're going to be really questioning certain established values, okay? Certain contracts that we have agreed upon within our relationships, within our day-to-day work environment, our routines, our emotional ways of being habits. All of these areas, depending on where the Saturn lands in your chart, of course, will come up for review, and you'll ask yourself again the question, is the structure serving me? And so if the answer is no, you probably felt the impulse to want to free yourself from it. And there are a few ways that this actually materializes. One of the ways is, you know what, I don't need this anymore, I'm done. Other ways are, I'm so angry at this process, I feel stuck, I need to break out, right? And then there are other areas where it's more timid and more oppressive, and it's like, I can't do this. I don't know if I can actually break that. Is it okay? Can I cross that threshold, right? So these three dynamics tend to play out because that's the way that we as human beings approach thresholds. Boundaries or borders that we've put up through Saturn to protect us and keep us safe now are not doing that anymore, right? And so we're finding ourselves essentially needing to cross that threshold. And that's what this energy wants us to do. So again, the threshold is about, where do I put my time? Is this time being used effectively? Is this the fairest exchange of my time? Time is about Saturn. What am I holding on to that I know is not working for me? Okay, so the Saturn retrograde is going to propose to us, each and every one of us, these questions of, what am I carrying with me, and do I still need it? Is it relevant? Okay, these are the types of questions you want to propose to yourself. So if Saturn's in your 7th house, then the question might come up around how you've created value exchange in a relationship. If Saturn's in the 10th house, you may think of yourself as going, is this really when I would put my time and energy, like in my career? Or is this how I want to be defined? Or is this, my life direction? Saturn in the 9th house may say, I'm curious. I wonder if this is the philosophy or the belief, So you get the picture of how this is going on, right? It's a throwing off element. So what are you deconditioning from? What are you getting rid of? Okay? So that's kind of the structure of how that works. And so, some things that you will see change, of course, are things like our social contracts. Okay, and you can see these types of dynamics play out over here in terms of, what are the rules? What are the routines? Within the context of our social sphere, what are the changing laws that are taking place? Okay, so a lot of this social interaction that we have as human beings is going to be deeply impacted by the Saturn retrograde. You're going to notice like deeper conflict and revolutions around the ways that we consider healthy exchange of social interaction. And in many cases, you're also going to see the continued breakdown of this, right? The inability to trust governmental structures or institutions because of the trust contract or the social contract breaking, okay? So I want to come over to this imagery over here, which is called the cross of planning. Now, again, for those of you that are familiar with human design, you will probably be familiar with what this means. For those of you that are not, that's okay. I do address this in the Saturn, sorry, not the Saturn, but the Taurus Scorpio nodal axis video, which is on my channel. You can go check that out. But essentially what this is, just without giving too much depth here, because it's a pretty big subject, is that every 400 years, human beings go through pattern change. Okay, so we have like patterns of ways in which we as human beings, our lives are ordered. Okay, so from 1615 to 2027, the cross of planning is essentially rooted in how we as human beings will establish institutions where skills are being developed and how we dedicate our time and energy into applying those skills in an industrialized way. Okay, so kind of like this tribal exchange of what is good for you is good for me. If you want to work for me, this is how much I want to give you. This is what I want you in return. It's very much about a social exchange. And I mentioned that in 1965, 1966, when Uranus and Pluto made a conjunction, and Neptune was in Scorpio, we had an initiation, right, energetically, in which the collapse of the cross of planning would occur. Essentially, that whenever cycles end, there needs to be a culmination. And so this Uranus-Pluto conjunction was deeply significant in initiating the closing out of this cycle, okay? And so it's just been an acceleration of decentralization, okay? Now, why is this essential to this conversation? Well, for two main reasons. One is that, and it was beautifully and eloquently described by somebody I work with, so thanks very much. You know who you are, you're watching this video, I appreciate it. This is the way that he described it to me, which I loved, which was that, and I'm kind of using my own variations in this, but essentially through the cross of planning, and this is why I'm bringing it out, is that we as human beings, and this is a large percentage of why me and Jen do this work, because of the nature of the change that we're going through, is that we've arrived at a point where for a very, very long time, the mechanism of self-identity that human beings have seen themselves through have come through single channels. Okay, so governments would say, this is what you should think, this is what you should do, here are the social rules, here's the social expectations, this is what money is. And so there were very defined and specific kind of models of definition, Saturn, around what life was. Okay, and so we obviously internalize this, and we would essentially assign our sense of self-identity in coordinates with these greater social rules, regulations, ideals, perspectives, and such. Okay. And the deeper you explore the cross-planning, you'll see how much this is, tied into it. But the idea here is that as this closes out and the culmination of this mechanism, the cycle, comes in, so does the breakdown in the projected ideals and value structures and models of what you should think and what is appropriate and what is not, etc. That also crumbles. And so now what you're actually left with is a deep awakening within the collective, where the social expectations of what is correct, the moral landscape, all of these things have now crumbled internally in people. And so there's a lot of fear, because once you saw yourself as a carpenter, or once you saw your sense of destiny fated as to become a lawyer, for instance, right? Very external ideals about who you are. And now as these things crumble, you find yourself going, I have no idea who I am, because you've never explored that part of you. You've never cultivated that part of you. You've never shown that authentic sense of interest. You've never allowed your self-interest to be purely seen as a mechanism of who you really are. And so there's these large parts of ourselves that are not defined and lived through, right? And so we don't know what our skills are in many ways, right? We have expertise based on ideas about what we could do in society, but we never have the internalized relationship of sense of identity and sense of self. Like, what are my boundaries? Where am I comfortable with or not? And that's where we kind of are. We're navigating this landscape of, emerging self-identity, essentially, because there's a large percentage of people that are like, I don't agree to this anymore, right? I don't agree to the social norm anymore. This Saturn retrograde is accelerating that process, right, at an incredibly fast rate. And you will see that as Venus and Uranus make a conjunction now, and over the next 6 months, you will see a radical shift, whether it is forced due to economic structures, a radical shift in self-understanding, in which you will be forced to look at yourself and say, who am I outside of this projected identity that I need to internalize as a way for the system to essentially make use of me, right? And that's where this kind of trajectory that I'm on at the moment, which has a lot to do with self-leadership. Okay, so you can see on the screen right now. So what do I mean by self-leadership? I mean, this is a tool to be able to help yourself navigate the rest of time over here. Because in the self-leadership space, you are realizing that you have the capacity to understand direction within yourself. You can make decisions. You're able to and capable of understanding what you have overall self-awareness that can contribute in ways that is not told to you, but you are in essentially emerging out of you, like saying, this is what I'm good at, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. It's like a self-interested sense of direction. And so the idea here again is looking at the way that we see ourselves and saying, okay, I want to try something new, which a lot of people will be forced into. It's very easy to internalize a message as, oh, I'm not good at this, as opposed to a kind of message. And I talked about this earlier in another video, which was like, what am I missing? And so the switch in the way that we navigate our lives is coming more from that growth mindset, right? Like, how are we growing? How we're able to tap into our resources and learn how to lead ourselves, Saturn retrograde. For any of you that have got Saturn retrograde plus an Aquarius, if anybody told you what to do, it's like, I don't know if you, I just imagine how rebellious you would be, right? And again, when the social contract breaks down, you'll have these two dimensions, like, oh my gosh, I need to be told what to do. Or it's, okay, what am I not capable? What am I capable of? Where can I take my time and energy? What skills can I cultivate? What things can I develop in myself? Where can I take responsibility for XYZ? And essentially put myself in a position where I can lead in a world that is so affected and going under like a tremendous amount of change. Okay. So this is kind of the message that I want to put across with the Saturn retrograde. And the idea here is ultimately to cultivate this many different aspects, but self-leadership, to come into reclaiming your sense of power. Recognize that for a large percentage of your life, most of you may have not actually done the things that you really are interested in because it would have been perceived as a hobby as opposed to the thing that you're actually good at. You know what I mean? So you would sacrifice what lights you up, that makes you creative, that allows you to contribute to things, and you would go into something that is safe or something that will give you the trajectory of you get to the age of 28, you get married, etc., etc. Like that whole entire thing is broken. And so for some of you, that's the perfect trajectory. For others, that may not be. And it's the ability to now come to that point and say, actually, I can choose for myself. So this is the potential that is held within these archetypes, and you're going to see this energy emerge for us. Okay, cool. So that's where I'll close off with today's message, and I really hope that this kind of impacts you in a way that maybe sparks curiosity to think right along these lines. And I'm sure probably many of you are already doing it anyway. Okay, cool. So two things that I want to quickly announce. First one is when in the last video, I announced to you guys that me and Jen are doing something behind the scenes that we're really excited about. And we posted a link that you can actually find in the description below, where if you want to know more about what's going on, we're happy to want to share that story with you. And so we've created a waitlist. Unfortunately, that link didn't work for, I think, like 4 or 5 hours. So some of you that have probably put your email in there, it didn't come through. So if you were sort of watching the video, if you're a little bit uncertain about if you put your email through and it's not there, please go ahead and resubmit your email address so that we know that you will be able to have access to all the information that we want to share around this new process, the Aquarian Life. And so that's that. And of course, you can find the link in the description as well, okay? And we'll be releasing some more material very soon around what that's going to be. The other thing is, for those of you that have used the thanks button on the actual video itself, I appreciate you, all of you, Rita, everyone. That was fantastic, and I can always am deeply appreciative of your support as well. And for all of you else that you make comments and give your thoughts and ideas and your experience of the Saturn retrograde, fantastic, I love reading them. Until another video, have a fantastic day and week. Okay guys, bye.